If you blink, you might miss the moment your life falls apart. That's what Thalia whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror of the pack kitchens. She smoothed down her stained apron. Today was her 18th birthday. In the world of the silver-clad pack, this was a day of immense significance. It was the day her wolf, a primal part of her very being, would finally awaken. It was also the day the moon goddess would reveal her fated mate, the one person destined to complete her soul through a unique, intoxicating scent. With a deep breath, Thalia stepped out into the pack square. The air was heavy with the smells of a celebration roasting meat, pine logs crackling in bonfires, and the boisterous energy of the pack. The silver-clad were a warrior pack, priding themselves on strength and military prowess. Everything about them was intense, from their training to their celebrations. At the very heart of the square stood Xylos. He was the alpha heir, the strongest, most celebrated warrior of their generation. He was tall, impossibly handsome, and carried himself with an air of arrogant confidence that both annoyed and captivated everyone. Today, he was surrounded by a circle of cheering betas, basking in the adoration. As Thalia lingered on the edge of the crowd, a scent hit her like a physical blow. It was sandalwood, ozone, and the rich smell of wet earth after a storm. It was the most beautiful scent she had ever imagined. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation. Deep within her, a presence she had waited years for, a wild and powerful force, finally stirred. Her wolf was awake. A name echoed in the deepest parts of her mind. Callie. Mate. Thalia breathed, the word a soft prayer on her lips. Suddenly, the roaring crowd went silent. His gaze swept across the square, a predator tracking its prey. And then, his eyes landed directly on Thalia, the girl who spent her days scrubbing the alpha's floors, the girl no one ever noticed. Thalia was an omega, the lowest rank in the pack's rigid hierarchy. She was meant to be submissive, quiet, and utterly unremarkable. But the mate bond didn't care about rank. It was a sacred decree from the moon goddess herself. Xylos strode toward her, his movements a symphony of controlled power. The crowd parted for him like the sea for a king, but his eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth and recognition a wolf should have when finding their soul's partner. He looked at her not with love, but with disbelief and disgust, as if he'd found a cockroach in his soup. You, Xylos's voice boomed across the now silent square, dripping with contempt. The moon goddess gave me a servant? His words were a slap in the face. Thalia's heart ached, but she stood her ground, her newfound wolf giving her a sliver of courage. The bond is sacred, Xylos, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But the weight of the pack's rigid class system, a system that had kept her down her entire life, made her feel small and insignificant. Xylos let out a harsh, cruel laugh. He glanced at the high-ranking wolves surrounding him, sharing a look of shared mockery. Then his gaze snapped back to Thalia, his eyes filled with pure, unadulterated disdain. I, Xylos, heir to the silver-clad pack, find it an insult to my bloodline to be mated to a meager omega. I reject you, Thalia. You are nothing to me. The rejection hit Thalia like a silver blade to the chest. It was an unbearable psychological pain, a severing of a sacred connection that was supposed to last an eternity. She gasped, clutching her heart as the bond shattered, sending shockwaves of agony through her soul. The crowd, sensing her weakness, began to jeer and laugh. In their world, an Omega's daughter was always meant to be bullied, always the victim. But then, something shifted. The searing pain of rejection didn't fade. It transformed. It intensified, twisting and coiling into a white-hot inferno within her. Thalia's eyes, which should have turned the golden yellow of a standard werewolf, flared with a brilliant, otherworldly violet light. Xylos recoiled, his arrogance momentarily replaced by shock and fear. What is that? What are you? He stammered, taking a step back. Thalia didn't need to answer with words. A wave of intense, crushing terror radiated from her body, washing over every single wolf in the square. It was a raw, primal fear that brought even the strongest warriors to their knees, gasping for breath. This wasn't a wolf's instinctual power. This was something else entirely, something ancient and far more powerful. This was the ability of a Lycan to project their emotions, to dominate others with sheer force of will. The Omega they all mocked was gone. In her place stood something they couldn't possibly comprehend, and her story was just beginning.
Thalia felt her body shift. It wasn't the slow, painful grind of a normal werewolf transformation. It was fluid and fast, triggered by her white-hot rage. She grew larger than any alpha. Her fur was the color of a winter moon, and her claws were long enough to shred silver plating. She was a Lycan, the king of alphas. The guards rushed forward with silver handcuffs. They threw a silver bomb, hoping the smoke would weaken her. Thalia felt the sting of the metal, but she didn't collapse. She retained every human memory and strategy, even in this form. She saw the path to the forest. She saw the fear in Xylos' eyes. She let out a roar that shattered the windows of the Alpha's pack house. With one leap, she cleared the training fence and vanished into the dark woods. She ran until the scent of the pack faded. In a clearing near the rogue territory, she shifted back. She was naked and shivering, but she wasn't alone. A man stood by a pine tree. He had a jagged scar across his cheek and eyes that had seen too many wars. "That was quite a show, princess," the man said. "I'm not a princess," Thalia snapped. "I'm a rogue." "You're a Lycan," the man corrected. "My name is Xylos. I'm what they call a lone wolf. I don't care about your bloodline, but I do care about staying alive. The Silverclad will be hunting you with silver bullets by dawn. Let them come," Thalia said. She looked at her hands. They were still trembling, but not from fear. "Xylos thinks he broke me. He just gave me a reason to start a revolution." Xylos walked closer. He handed her a tattered cloak. "There are others like us. Sigmas the Pax threw away because they were defective. Rogues who just wanted to live in peace. They need a leader who isn't a tyrant." Thalia wrapped the cloak around herself. She thought about the guide she would write in her head. Step 1. Survive the rejection. Step 2. Find an army. "Where are these Sigmas?" Thalia asked. "In the fringe," Xylos said. "But be careful. A woman named Elora leads them. She doesn't trust anyone who smells like a great pack." "She'll trust me," Thalia said. She felt a spark of lightning dance between her fingers. Her Lycan blood was bonded to the storm. "I'm going to show Xylos exactly what happens when you discard the moon goddess's gift." They trekked through the night, avoiding the main roads. Thalia knew the pack laws. Rogues had no protection. They could be killed on sight. But the Silverclad didn't know she could heal faster than any medicine. They didn't know she kept her mind while she wore her fur. By sunrise, they reached a hidden canyon. A group of women stood at the entrance. They were small and looked fragile, but their eyes were sharp. One woman stepped forward. She smelled of sweet honey and old secrets. "A Lycan in the fringe?" Elora asked, her voice carrying a hypnotic lilt. "Why shouldn't I use my pheromones to walk you right off that cliff, stranger?" Thalia stepped into the woman's personal space. She didn't flinch. "Because Xylos is coming with silver and fire, and I'm the only one who knows how to make him regret it." "I don't care if you're the moon goddess herself," Elora said as she circled Thalia. The Sigma leader moved with a grace that hid her perceived weakness. "In this camp, we don't follow alphas, and we certainly don't follow Lycans who bring trouble to our door." Thalia felt the air around her grow heavy. A sweet, cloying scent filled her lungs. It was Elora's pheromones. The Sigma was using her hypnotic effect to try and bend Thalia's will. Thalia felt her knees tremble. The urge to do whatever Elora asked was nearly overwhelming. "Stop it," Thalia grounded out. She tapped into her Lycan nature. Unlike standard wolves who rely on instinct, Thalia could project her own emotions. She pushed a wave of cold, hard determination back at Elora. The hypnotic haze snapped. Elora gasped, taking a step back. The other Sigmas gathered around, their eyes wide. They were used to being the lowest rank, the ones kicked out for being defective. They weren't used to someone resisting them. "Xylos isn't just coming for me," Thalia said, her voice echoing in the canyon. "He's coming to clear the vermin from the borders. He has silver bombs and silver-tipped spears. He doesn't see you as people. He sees you as targets." Xylos stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of a rusted blade. "She's right, Elora. The silver-clad pack holds the military force in high regard. They've been training in the public square every day. They are prepared for a threat, and Xylos has decided you are it. Alora looked at her people. They were small, and many were skittish. What can we do? We are Sigmas. We hide in small spaces when we're scared. We aren't warriors. You can run fast, Thalia countered, recalling the strengths of the Sigma rank. And you can bite. A Sigma's bite is a wound a werewolf can't easily heal from. You have weapons you haven't even used yet. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the entrance of the canyon. Black smoke filled with silver dust billowed in. The Sigmas screamed, many of them dropping to the ground as the silver concentration began to weaken their systems. They're here, Xylos shouted. Thalia didn't wait. She felt the joy of the coming fight, a strange, Lycan reaction, and her body shifted into a smaller, more agile wolf form. She stayed low to the ground, her human mind calculating the wind direction. Xylos stepped through the smoke. He wore silver-plated armor and held a crossbow loaded with silver bolts. Behind him were his betas, his loyal right-hand men. "Come out, little Omega," Xylos yelled. "I've come to finish the rejection." Thalia didn't growl. She used her elemental bond with the air. She swirled the wind, pushing the silver smoke back toward Xylos's own men. The warriors began to cough and retch as their own weapons turned against them.
"Now,"
Thalia telepathically commanded the Sigmas. Alora and the others didn't shift. They used their pheromones in a concentrated burst. The male warriors in the front line froze, their minds clouded by the hypnotic scent. They became a wall of meat, blocking Xylos's path. Thalia leaped from the shadows. She shifted midair back into her massive Lycan form. She pinned Xylos to the canyon wall, her claws inches from his throat. "You said I was nothing," Thalia hissed. Her human memories flashed through her mind. Every floor she scrubbed, every insult he threw. "But look at you. You can't even lead your men through a bit of fog." Xylos glared at her, his face twisting with rage. "You're a freak. A Lycan is just a monster that remembers being a man. My father will bring the whole pack. You can't fight a bloodline." "I'm not fighting a bloodline," Thalia said. She leaned in close, her violet eyes burning. "I'm starting a new one." She didn't kill him. Instead, she bit down hard on his shoulder. Xylos screamed. The Sigma-style bite would fester, resisting the natural healing of his wolf. "Go back to your father," Thalia commanded, using her Lycan aura to project absolute authority. "Tell him the new Luna has claimed the fringe. And tell him that if he wants a son to heal, he'll have to come to me and beg." Thalia tossed him toward his retreating men. The Sigmas cheered, a sound of defiance that hadn't been heard in the fringe for generations. Alora walked up to Thalia, her eyes no longer filled with suspicion. "You didn't just save us. You gave us a bite." Thalia looked at the retreating silver-clad warriors. "That was just step 2, Alora. Step 3 is making sure they never want to come back. If you want to kill a king, you don't aim for his heart, you aim for his pride," Thalia said, her voice echoing through the damp canyon as she watched the last of Xylos's soldiers scramble away. She stood among the Sigmas, her violet eyes still humming with the remnants of her shift. Behind her, Alora and the others were already gathering the discarded silver weapons. "The Alpha King won't come to beg," Thalia, Xylos warned, leaning against a jagged rock. "Alexander is a Lycan himself. He believes in bloodline inheritance above all else. To him, you aren't a revolutionary. You're a defect that needs to be erased." Thalia turned a silver-tipped arrow over in her hand. The metal hummed with a cold energy that made her wolf, Callie, pace nervously in her mind.
"He won't have a choice."
"The bite I gave Xylos is a Sigma-style wound. His wolf can't heal it. Every hour he waits, the infection spreads to his chakra energy." "Look," Alora whispered, pointing toward the canyon rim. A single rider appeared. He wasn't wearing the heavy armor of the silver-clad pack. He wore black leather and carried a staff made of weirwood. This was a Delta, a high-ranking messenger and scout for the Alpha King. "Thalia of the no-name pack," the Delta shouted. King Alexander demands an audience at the neutral bridge. Bring the cure, or the silver-clad will burn the fringe to ash by nightfall. Tell the king I don't take orders from people who reject their own blood, Thalia yelled back. She looked at Alora. Gather the most intelligent epsilons. We need a strategy, not just a fight. If we go to that bridge, it's an ambush. Thalia knew the hierarchy was rigid and platonic. Alphas like Alexander saw rogues as a threat to be hunted. But she also knew that Lycans like her could retain their human memories and strategies while in wolf form. While Alexander would rely on brute instinct and pack numbers, Thalia would rely on the complexity of her dual nature. Hours later, at the neutral bridge, the air was thick with tension. King Alexander stood on the stone planks, his presence so dominant it made the nearby trees seem to lean away from him. Xylos lay on a litter behind him, his shoulder black and oozing. You have the scent of a Lycan, but the soul of a peasant. Alexander spat as Thalia approached. And you have the title of a king, but the manners of a rogue, Thalia countered.
She didn't bow.
She felt her elemental bond with the earth beneath the bridge. She could feel the vibration of the water below, her water-bonded nature making her movements serene and fluid despite the danger. Give me the antidote, Alexander commanded. There is no antidote, Alexander, Thalia said, stepping onto the bridge. There is only a choice. You recognize me as the Luna of the Fringe and grant us independence, or you watch your only heir become a mindless Omega. Alexander's eyes flashed red. He shifted instantly, but it wasn't a standard wolf shift. He became a monstrous, shadowy beast, a Lycan responding to his own fury. He lunged across the bridge. Thalia didn't shift. She waited until the last second. She used her Lycan ability to project her own calm onto the king. For a heartbeat, Alexander's rage flickered. It was long enough for Thalia to sidestep and strike.
She didn't use a claw.
She used a small pouch of wolfsbane mixed with silver dust. She slammed it into his chest. The king roared, his form flickering as the poison weakened him. Thalia stood over him, her voice a low, vibrating hum that resonated with the telepathic frequency of every Lycan nearby. The moon goddess made us mates to keep the balance, not to serve your ego, Thalia said, looking at the suffering Xylos and then back at the king. I am the new Luna, and this is the first day of your new world. The king's guards moved to intervene, but the Sigmas appeared from the trees, their arms protecting their heads in their signature defensive stance, but their eyes were glowing with the hypnotic power Thalia had taught them to harness. We're leaving, Thalia said, turning her back on the king. If Xylos survives the night, it's because the moon goddess is merciful. If he doesn't, it's because you are too proud to listen to a girl from the kitchens. If you want to rule a pack, you have to be more than a warrior. You have to be a ghost, Thalia muttered as she watched the smoke rise from the silver-clad camp. She stood on a jagged cliff overlooking the valley, her silver fur shimmering in the twilight. Beside her, Xylos sharpened a blade of darkened steel. The air was cold, but Thalia felt a strange warmth radiating from her skin, a side effect of her Lycan elemental bond with fire that made her more aggressive in the face of a threat. Alexander won't stay down for long, Xylos said, his voice like grinding stones. He's a Lycan, Thalia. He retains his human memories, even in his wolf form. He's currently sitting in his hall, calculating exactly how many silver bombs it will take to level this canyon. Let him calculate, Thalia said. She turned toward the center of their makeshift camp. He thinks he's fighting a pack of rogues. He doesn't realize he's fighting a military force that doesn't care about his rigid class hierarchy. In the clearing below, the Sigmas were no longer hiding. Under Alora's direction, they were training in martial arts, their movements fast and fluid. Even the Omegas, who had been treated as slaves in Xylos' setting, were standing tall. They were the common people who had finally found a leader who didn't see them as meager or poor. Suddenly, the mind link hummed in Thalia's head. It wasn't the usual pack chatter. It was a jagged, piercing signal. He's here. The voice of an Epsilon scout echoed in her mind. The Alpha King didn't wait for the dawn. He sent the rogues. Thalia's eyes flared violet. Alexander was using the outcasts, the rogues who killed for vengeance or just because, as his front line. It was a clever move. If they died, the pack lost nothing. If they won, the problem of the fringe was solved. Elora, get the Sigmas to the high ground, Thalia shouted. Creos, take the Epsilons and flank the river. They'll try to use the water to mask their scent. As the first wave of rogue wolves crashed into the camp, Thalia didn't shift immediately. She waited, her human mind retaining every strategy she had learned while watching the alphas train from the kitchen windows. She saw the lead rogue, a massive, scarred beast who had been kicked out of a northern pack for treason. She shifted mid-stride. This time, she wasn't just a wolf. She was a nightmare of silver and fire. She projected a wave of absolute, crushing joy onto the attacking rogues, a unique Lycan ability that confused their predatory instincts and made them hesitate. In that moment of hesitation, the Sigmas struck. They didn't fight like warriors, they fought like survivors. They used their hypnotic pheromones to create a dizzying haze, making the rogues snap at thin air. When a rogue did get close, the Sigmas bit hard, leaving wounds that burned with a hormone that made the males frenzy and lose focus. Thalia cornered the lead rogue against a cedar tree. She didn't kill him. She pinned him with a paw that glowed with the heat of a forge. Alexander sent you to die so he wouldn't have to get his hands dirty, Thalia growled, her voice vibrating through the telepathic link. Why die for a king who thinks you're a threat to his regular pack? The rogue snarled, but the fear in his eyes was clear. He promised us a place in the hierarchy. He promised we wouldn't be hunted anymore. He lied, Thalia said. She shifted back to her human form, standing naked and unashamed in the wreckage of the fight. I don't offer you a place in a hierarchy. I offer you a pack where the alpha is the one who protects, not the one who commands. The rogue looked at the Sigmas and the Omegas standing their ground. He looked at Thalia, a Lycan who possessed abilities his wolf brain couldn't even fathom. Slowly, he lowered his head in submission. Step 4 of the guide, Creos, Thalia said, wiping soot from her brow. When the king sends his monsters, turn them into your guard. But the victory was short-lived. A low, rhythmic thumping started to vibrate through the earth. It wasn't the sound of paws. It was the sound of heavy boots. The silver-clad infantry, Elora whispered, her face pale. They aren't using wolves. They're using silver weapons and military formations. Thalia looked at her new, ragtag army. Then it's time to show them that a Lycan's dual nature is more than just a myth. The ground is shaking because they're afraid to walk on it alone, Thalia said, her voice cutting through the panic of the camp as the rhythmic thud of the silver-clad infantry drew closer. She stood at the mouth of the canyon, watching the moonlight glint off the silver-plated shields of Alexander's elite guard. These were warriors who lived in packs and held their military force in high regard. They moved in a rigid class hierarchy, a wall of steel designed to crush anything in its path. Creos moved to her side, his nostrils flaring. They've brought silver bombs. If those canisters break in this enclosed space, even your Lycan lungs won't be able to breathe. Then we don't let the air stay still, Thalia replied. She felt her elemental bonding with the air begin to hum beneath her skin. As a Lycan, she was more complex and aware than the wolves marching toward them, her human memories of strategy blending with her rising power. The infantry halted. At the command of a beta, the alpha's right-hand man, the soldiers launched a volley of canisters into the canyon. Thalia didn't shift into her massive wolf form yet. Instead, she raised her hands, calling upon the air. She created a localized vortex, a spinning wall of wind that caught the silver gas bombs midair and hurled them back toward the infantry lines. The canisters exploded among the silver-clad. The warriors began to weaken as the silver concentration filled their lungs.
Now,
Thalia telepathically signaled the Sigmas. Elora led the charge, but it wasn't a frontal assault. The Sigmas used their ability to run fast in human form, darting through the shadows of the canyon walls. They were the lowest rank, often bullied and called unintelligent, but today they were the ghosts in the smoke. They used their hypnotic pheromones to create a dizzying effect, causing the silver-clad soldiers to see double and strike at the air. Thalia finally shifted. She didn't become a smaller, playful wolf. Her anger at the king's tyranny transformed her into a fearsome, towering creature. She lunged into the heart of the infantry. Unlike the wolves who relied on instinct, Thalia retained every human memory of Xylos's training sessions. She knew their weak points. She avoided the silver-tipped spears with a fluidity that suggested a water-bonded serenity even in the heat of battle. She found the beta leading the charge and pinned him to the floor of the valley. "Tell the king that his bloodline inheritance is a lie," she growled, her voice a telepathic roar that echoed in the minds of every soldier present. "The moon goddess didn't bless you, so you could enslave your own kind." The beta tried to strike her with a silver dagger, but Thalia bit down on his wrist. Her Sigma-style bite, difficult for any werewolf to heal from, made him drop the weapon in agony. The silver-clad began to break ranks. They were gregarious creatures who relied on the alpha's strength, but their alpha king was nowhere to be seen, and his heir was rotting from an infected wound. Without a leader, the rigid hierarchy collapsed into chaos. "Step 5 of the guide, Krios," Thalia said as she shifted back, her skin glowing with the warmth of her fire bond. "If you want to make an ex cry, you take away the only thing he ever loved, his power." Elora approached, her eyes bright with victory.
They're retreating to the Packlands.
"But they'll be back with Alexander. He won't let a defective Sigma and a rogue Lycan win." "He doesn't have a choice," Thalia said, looking at the silver weapons her people were now scavenging. "Because we aren't just rogues anymore. We're a pack." She looked toward the distant lights of the silver-clad city. "And it's time we paid a visit to the king's palace. The moon goddess watches over all her children, even the ones you tried to bury," Thalia whispered as she stood on the balcony overlooking the silver-clad capital. Below, the pack was gathered for the festival, a tradition where werewolves believed they were blessed by their creator. To anyone else, Thalia looked like a high-ranking guest in her stolen silk gown, but beneath the fabric, her skin hummed with the heat of a fire-bonded Lycan. Beside her stood Elora, whose Sigma pheromones were dialed to a low, hypnotic frequency that made the palace guards overlook their presence. They were deep inside the hierarchy's heart, a place where the Alpha King Alexander reigned as a king of alphas. "Xylos is in the north wing," Elora murmured, her eyes scanning the crowd of warriors who held military force in high regard. "The infection from your bite has reached his chakra energy. He can't even shift into his wolf form to heal himself." Thalia moved through the hall with a serenity that masked her predatory intent. She passed several betas, the alpha's right-hand men, who were busy coordinating the festival's security. They didn't realize that a Lycan retains human memories and strategies even when their wolf is close to the surface. She pushed open the heavy oak doors to the alpha's private chambers. Xylos lay on a bed of furs, looking meager and weak, a far cry from the dominant leader he claimed to be. His skin was pale, and the scent of sandalwood and ozone that had once marked him as her mate was now sour with sickness. "You look exactly how you made me feel for 18 years, Thalia said, her voice cold. Xylos gasped, his eyes widening. "Thalia? You shouldn't be able to breathe in here. The walls are lined with silver concentration. I'm a Lycan, Xylos. We're a bit more complex than the wolves you're used to." She walked to the window, watching the moon goddess's light spill over the city. "I could have let the infection take you. A Sigma's bite is difficult for any werewolf to heal from. But I wanted you to see the world you built crumble first." Suddenly, the door burst open. King Alexander stood there, his eyes flashing with the fury of a Lycan king. He didn't hesitate. He shifted into a massive, fearsome creature, his transformation triggered by his explosive anger. "You dare enter my home, rogue?" Alexander's telepathic roar shook the glass in the windows. Thalia didn't shift. Instead, she used her Lycan ability to project an aura of crushing fear onto the king. It was a unique bond that influenced those around her. Alexander stumbled, his momentum breaking as his own mind betrayed him. "This isn't your home anymore," Thalia said, her voice echoing with the authority of a Lycan who could command alphas. The Sigmas you cast out are at your gates. The rogues you hunted are in your kitchens. Your hierarchy is a cage, and I just opened the door. Outside, the sound of silver core explosions signaled the start of the coup. But it wasn't the sound of a massacre, it was the sound of the pack's armory being neutralized by Thalia's air-bonded vortexes. Thalia looked back at Xylos, who was weeping in his bed, the psychological pain of the broken mate bond finally catching up to him. Step 6 of the guide, Xylos, Thalia said as she stepped toward the shifting king. If you want to make your ex cry, make sure he's still alive to see you take his crown. A crown doesn't make a leader any more than a collar makes a dog, Thalia said, her voice cutting through the roar of the silver core explosions rocking the palace foundations. She stood over the slumped form of King Alexander. The king, a Lycan who usually possessed the ability to project his emotions onto others, was currently drowning in the wave of absolute, cold justice Thalia radiated. Outside, the strict and fixed-class hierarchy of the silver-clad pack was dissolving into the night. For generations, they believed in bloodline inheritance, that an alpha's son must be alpha, and an omega's daughter must be an omega, meager and bullied. But as Thalia looked at the chaos, she saw omegas standing tall alongside rogues who had finally found a home. You think this is victory? Alexander hissed, his form flickering between human and a larger, fearsome Lycan. The moon goddess designated the mate bond as sacred. By rejecting Xylos and breaking this pact, you are spitting on her grace. The moon goddess gave us hearts, Alexander, not just scripts to follow, Thalia countered. She gestured to the window where the moon goddess shone down on the gathering. Xylos rejected me because I was an omega. He chose his ego over the bond. I'm just the consequence. Thalia turned as Xylos and Elora entered the chambers. They were followed by a group of Sigmas, women born with defects who had been trafficked or cast out to fend for themselves on the streets. Now, they carried silver weapons scavenged from the armory. The palace is ours, Elora said, her voice steady. The betas have surrendered. They realized that without you, Xylos can't heal from the Sigma bite. Thalia walked back to Xylos's bedside. The alpha heir looked at her with eyes full of unbearable psychological pain. He had reached the age where his wolf had woken up and allowed him to recognize his mate by her scent, but he had thrown that gift away. I won't kill you, Xylos, Thalia said, her violet eyes glowing with a serenity that only a water-bonded Lycan could possess. And I won't heal you. Not yet. What are you going to do? Xylos whispered. I'm going to make you a rogue, Thalia declared. The room went silent. Being cast out of the pack was the heaviest punishment a werewolf could face. You will live in the fringe. You will see how the meager survive. You will learn that a wolf's strength is determined by their identity, not their fur color or rank. She looked at King Alexander, who was held down by Xylos. And you, Alexander, you will stay here. Not as a king, but as an advisor to the new council. You will teach the pack that Lycans can celebrate their dual nature through storytelling and rituals, not just through military force. Thalia stepped onto the balcony, looking out at the city. The werewolves were no longer gathered in a rigid military formation. They were talking, sharing memories, and breathing air that was finally free of silver concentration. Step 7 of the guide, Thalia said to the night air, a small, humorous smile playing on her lips. If you want to make your ex cry, build a world where he's no longer the main character. Elora stood beside her, looking at the moon. What now, Luna? Thalia felt the wind whip around her, a spark of air elemental energy dancing on her fingertips. Now, we write a new story. If you want to know if a man has changed, don't look at his face. Look at his hands, Thalia remarked as she leaned against a moss-covered oak at the edge of the fringe. A year had passed since the silver-clad pack's rigid and platonic hierarchy had been dismantled. The air no longer smelled of silver core explosives or the cloying fear of the oppressed. Instead, it smelled of pine, damp earth, and the faint, sweet scent of Sigmas who finally lived in safety. Beside her, Elora adjusted the satchel on her shoulder. The Sigma leader had become the head of education for the pack, teaching the younger generation that their identity was determined by their soul, not just their fur color or a mutation. "He's coming," Elora whispered, nodding toward the trail that led from the rogue settlement. A lone figure emerged from the shadows. His clothes were tattered, and his face was lean from a year of surviving as a rogue. Xylos, the former Alpha heir who once held the military force in high regard, stopped a few feet away. He didn't stand with the dominant posture of a warrior anymore. His hands were calloused from gathering wood and hunting for the Omega elders he once called meager. "The moon goddess's children are gathering for the solstice," Thalia said, her voice soft but echoing with the authority of the new Luna. "The Sigmas tell me you've been helping them hide during their heat cycles, protecting them from those who would treat them as slaves." Xylos looked down at his scarred hands. The Sigma-style bite on his shoulder had finally faded into a silver-white scar, a permanent reminder that some wounds were difficult for even an Alpha's wolf to heal. "I spent 18 years believing I was the king of the world because of my bloodline inheritance," he said, his voice raspy. "I was wrong. I was just a boy with a title and a cold heart." Thalia walked toward him. She could still smell the sandalwood and ozone of the mate bond, but the unbearable psychological pain of the rejection had long since been replaced by a quiet, steady peace. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, silver-free medallion, the mark of a Gamma. The pack needs scouts who know the territory of the rogues and how to identify threats before they reach our gates. We need someone who understands that being cast out is a heavy punishment and works to ensure no one else has to endure it alone. Xylos looked at the medallion, then at Thalia. "You're giving me a rank? After what I did?" "I'm giving you a choice, Xylos," Thalia said, her violet Lycan eyes shimmering with the memory of her own struggle. "The moon goddess may choose the mate, but you choose the man. Step 8 of the guide. The best way to make your ex cry is to show them exactly what they lost, and then show them who they could have been." As the sun began to set, Thalia shifted. She didn't become a monster of rage. She became a massive, silver-furred Lycan that radiated a sense of calm and protection over the valley. She let out a howl that wasn't a call to war, but a song of a pack that lived together in different ranks, not as masters and slaves, but as a family. Xylos watched her run toward the palace of glass, a single tear tracking through the dirt on his cheek. He finally understood. She hadn't just taken his crown. She had given him his soul.